I'm going to be talking a little bit about how to set up AWS with a modern identity security solution like ConductorOne, and some of the ways that companies traditionally set up AWS and the challenges with managing access control to those environments in those traditional setups. So a lot of companies obviously use cloud infrastructure like AWS. AWS has a very robust IAM permission control plane. It has permission sets, it has groups, it has accounts, and all of those different objects combine together to create the ability for users who are in the AWS ecosystem to access resources, S3 buckets, assume roles, which grant them access to other resources within the accounts. And so what you have is you have your AWS environment. Let's say in this particular case, you've got IAM Identity Center being used. So AWS Identity Center is the way that the particular customer is managing access to their different AWS accounts. And then you've got tons of AWS accounts down here, let's say 100 plus. So that's your AWS world. And within this AWS Identity Center, you might have SSO groups and SSO users, and these are pulled over from your SSO solution. So I'll go ahead and put the SSO provider over here. There's an AWS application here, and maybe via SCIM, we are replicating SSO groups and SSO users into the AWS Identity Center context. And so one of the challenges right off the bat here is that you've got two different systems. You have an enforcement system, which is AWS, that controls who has access to what. And then your control of how people get that access is actually managed via your SSO provider. So that's one of the challenges right away is your infrastructure team many times is actually the team that should be controlling and making decisions about who has access in those environments. But your SSO provider might be managed by let's say your IT team and your help desk, for example. And so immediately you have a little bit of a persona challenge in terms of who's actually managing access to those resources. The second challenge that we have in this particular environment is that, let's say that within each of these accounts, we've got, let's just make it simple and say 5 different roles, 5 assumed roles in each of these. And again, let's say that we have 100 accounts. So the permutations of even just assume role permissions across this environment is going to be 100 accounts times 5 assume role permissions, if you will. And that's going to be 500 permutations of kind of levels of access across those different accounts. To manage that access granularly, the traditional model that's used in a SCIM context is a group per permission set group account kind of combination. And so what you'll need to do is you'll need to go over now into your SSO provider, and you're going to have to add a group for every single one of those permutations, and then skim these over through your SSO groups, which then manages access to a specific assume role permission within a specific account using a permission set assignment to the group. Now, you can just imagine the challenges here. One of the challenges, you have a massive group sprawl problem where you just added 500 groups effectively to manage access to those AWS accounts. You also have a self-service issue where you've got infrastructure teams adding additional AWS accounts. They might want to manage access to those different accounts and define the permissions, but they've got to now orchestrate this with a different team to create these groups, create the group assignments. And you've got this just total orchestration problem and challenge. And then again, across different teams, and then this duplication of sort of groups to your AWS environment. This is where ConductorOne comes in. And one of the ways that we see customers using ConductorOne to make this a lot more efficient is within our platform, we have obviously an SSO connection into the SSO provider. And so we understand, let's say, group assignment or application assignments within this context for the application for AWS access. We also have an AWS connector here, which tells us all of the SSO groups, SSO users, the different accounts, the different permission sets within the context of all that AWS infrastructure. And so now what I can do is I can layer a policy on top of approvals for these permissions. And then we enable self-service through our platform. And then without having to replicate any of these groups here, ConductorOne can orchestrate coarse-grained access to the application itself, and then actually orchestrate the permission set assignment direct to the user, or to the identity rather, using a permission set assignment to the user, or a permission set assignment to the group, or a group assignment to the user. And so what this lets you do is it lets you effectively remove all this group sprawl here. The connective tissue of ConductorOne to the SSO provider is simply for the perspective of assigning application access. And then we are orchestrating permission assignment direct to the AWS infrastructure, which also allows your application or resource owners to manage that in ConductorOne through policy, through, again, that self-service experience. And so it's a much more efficient way to actually manage access. You decrease the number of objects and the kind of sprawl. You've enabled self-service because when you've added new accounts here in the AWS environment, those are discovered directly in ConductorOne, and you can assign policy to them, and everything works seamlessly.